Some people from a certain age remember spending hours giving your Oregon Trail family names that were based on their own or friends' names. They also remember leading their MS-DOS-based adventures and laughing when brother Stinky Johnny died of dysentery. What a joke. There were about as many accidents and illnesses on the real Oregon Trail. The National Oregon-California Trail Center says that more than 300,000 Americans did cross it at the end of the 1800s. It took about 5 to 6 months from beginning to end, which is hard to believe now. Got rid of everything that won't fit in your wagon and set out without Google Maps to help you? Since they were brave and a little crazy, it's not surprising that a lot of bad things happened along the way. The Utter Van Ornum Massacre. Native American groups and early travelers, who were mostly fur sellers and missionaries, didn't really fight with each other very often. But not everyone was happy when people started moving west and taking land for themselves without any reason. You'd be mad too. Bad luck struck the Utter Van Ornum wagon train, which would be remembered as the most deadly wagon train in history. The group, which was led by Elijah Utter, sometimes written Otter, had 4 families, 21 children, and a few ex-soldiers. On September 9, 1860, they were attacked, and 11 people died in the 2-day battle. According to the story told by the Washington State Historical Society, they may have been the lucky ones. This is because the 4 soldiers left the party with no defense when they took the first chance they had to grab the best horses and run away. Colonel George Wright, who was in charge of the forces and the rescue effort, said that the cowards probably kept them alive. The group split up, and one man made it to a military camp outside of Fort Dalles in time to sound the alarm. While searching for survivors, the relief teams came across some, but Lieutenant Anderson found the most horrific scene. He found a group of 15 people, 5 of whom were dead and had been eaten by the others who were still alive. After making sure everyone was safe, they found that only 15 people were still alive. The Sager Orphans. Do you ever feel like you're having the worst luck in the world? You don't know anything about the 7 spare Sager children. The National Park Service says that in early 1844, 6 children left Missouri with their parents. A 7th child was born in the wagon. By the time they got to the Rockies, family patriarch Henry Sager was sick, so he was buried next to Green River. As a result of her grief, Naomi Sager got sick, and her daughter Catherine wrote that she was at times perfectly insane. She died near Twin Falls, Idaho, leaving the children, who ranged in age from 13 to a baby, without a parent for the first time. As the wagon train went on, they were taken in by preachers Marcus and Narcissa Whitman. By the end of the year, they had set up a safe home in the Walla Walla Valley and officially adopted the 7 children. 3 years later, they were killed in a killing along with the oldest children, John and Francisco Sager. The rest were captured, but only 4 were freed after being paid a fee. The 5th got sick and died. Seriously, things aren't that bad for you, and if there's any comfort in that, it's the diaries of the girls who made it out alive that talk about how kind people were to them along the way. Camp sacrifice. People who left only had what they could carry. Imagine taking your whole family across the country with nothing but the things that will fit in a minivan. There would be no lunch stops or Taco Bells along the way. Food was very important, which makes Fort Laramie, also known as Camp Sacrifice, even more sad. The Plains Across says that Fort Laramie grew into a major trade post. Settlers would load up their wagons with too much stuff, so they could trade when they got to the fort. But that didn't always work out. It was like everyone was in the same boat, and sellers didn't need the less useful things they brought with them. People have written about the dumps outside the fort that were full of valuable things like books, iron safes, and bookshelves. People also left useful things because they didn't want their horses to carry the heavy loads. Weapons, anvils, plows, kegs, and barrels were all dumped. Also dumped? Extra food, and one story even talked about 220 pounds of bacon that were left behind. Because so many people later died of hunger, it's hard not to wonder how many people died thinking of all the things they dumped. The Donner Party's Undelivered Letter. The Donner Party story is the second most popular thing about the Oregon Trail. You may already know it, When they left in 1846, they were going to California, not Oregon, via online Nevada. About half of them died horribly in the Sierra Nevada mountains. We can talk about whether it's better to eat or be eaten another time, but the sad side note is that the whole thing could have been avoided. There wasn't much use for the Hastings cutoff as a shortcut, and Fort Bridger, shown, was at the start. Edwin Bryant wrote them a letter telling them it was too dangerous to take the so-called route. There was actually a scout riding ahead of the Donner Party. The founders and owners of Fort Bridger got the letter. They were the ones who would benefit the most if thousands of settlers started coming through their trade post. So you can probably guess what happened next. Jim Bridger and his partner Louis Vasquez could have given the Donner Party the note, which would have led them to a safer road and probably stopped all the cannibalism nonsense. Instead, they didn't warn them, putting them through some of the worst days you can imagine, all to make money. Murder or survival? For some, making it through the Oregon Trail wasn't the end. Just ask Louis Keseberg. He was in the Donner Party, and Sierra College says he paid a terrible price to stay alive. There were rumors that he was the first to eat the not-so-delicious meal of his fellow settlers, that he killed people for their meat, and that he liked eating people more than beef. So many people said bad things about him that he sued for slander and won $1. But when Keseberg died in 1895, even his tombstone said he was a cannibal. A few people talked to him, and when he was 62, he made his first official comment. He wrote that time was supposed to heal all hurts, but that wasn't true in this case. Keseberg had sent his wife and a child on ahead and said, "For their sakes, I must live. I cannot describe the unutterable repugnance with which I tasted that first mouthful of flesh. This food was never otherwise than loathsome, insipid, and disgusting." Wolves kept scratching at the meat inside the cabin for 2 months while he was there, among the bodies of his friends who had died. Just before she died, Tamsin Donner left her dead husband and went to be with him. He swore he only ate and never killed, writing, "A man before he judges me should be placed in a similar situation." Accidental gunshots. The National Park Service says that the Oregon Trail is the longest graveyard in the country. They estimate 1 in 10 travelers didn't survive, and the National Oregon-California Trail Center says the 2,000-mile trail averaged 10 deaths per mile. You and your family in MS-DOS both had to deal with dysentery and cholera, but there was also a big problem. There were no gun safety classes. Because you'd start with more money, did you always choose the banker? It sounds good, but how many bankers really know how to hold a gun? It's not a joke. Road Tripper says that the first person to die from a gun accident on the trail did so in Blue Mound, Kansas. His name was John Shotwell, and it was a bad name. The gun went off as he pulled it from the back of his truck, muzzle first. It hit him in the chest. It took him an hour to die, in full possession of his senses. Sure, there are a lot of ways to go on the trail, but no one wants to be remembered like that, and he definitely wasn't the only one. The Mormon Handcart Tragedies. Now that we know what went wrong with Brigham Young's plan to bring new Mormons to their new heaven on earth, let's play a game. According to the Denver Post, the plan was simple. Converts from Britain and Scandinavia, who were too poor to buy carts, would put everything they owned on a handcart, push it across the US, and finish the trip in just 60 days. That sounds great, right? It sounds great, but wait until you hear the list of troubles. There were no supply stops. Carts broke down more often than they worked. People in Salt Lake City didn't know who was coming, and visitors weren't ready to do the work of hunters, pioneers, and oxen all at the same time. 10 handcart companies traveled the road between 1856 and 1860. Tragically, 2 of them, the Martin and Willie companies, died along the way. Only those 2 businesses had 1,100 people, and they didn't leave until August. Once more, we can see that they were buried under feet of snow. Hundreds of them died, and those who made it out lost arms and legs to frostbite. What a terrible thing to happen. But there is an interesting side point to this. Anne Campbell Giles, 10, and Maximilian Parker, 12, were the only ones who made it out alive. They lived together, got married, and had a son named Butch Cassidy, who, you may know, Just look at what his parents went through to understand why he was such a badass. The milk sickness. There were an unexpectedly large number of newborn babies walking along the path. The cycle of life never stops for anyone or anything. Since so many people were dying, there were a lot of children without parents. Babies were usually given to another nursing mother to care for. Things didn't always go well. A doctor and public health expert named Brian Altonen looked into the diseases that were spreading through wagon trains and found the sad story of Susanna, a little girl who died just 1 month after her mother. People who were with her didn't get sick from her, but the pioneers didn't know that at the time. Altonen says that Susanna was given to a new mother who was breastfeeding her own child. The nurse chose to give the baby cow's milk instead of breastfeeding so that the new mother's child would not get any infections from the orphan. Badly, the cows were feeding on poison ivy and white snake root, which made the milk poisonous and bitter. While we don't know how many babies died because of Susanna's milk sickness, we do know that animals had to graze on land that had been badly overgrazed. They fed their babies all sorts of bad foods, and the bugs got into their milk. The road to hell and everything. Quack doctors and granny medicine. Brian Altonen says that the settlers brought common drugs with them, like opium, whiskey, castor oil, and peppermint essence, so that if you're dying, you wouldn't know it. Historic Oregon City says that granny medicine, which was basically home remedies passed down from mother to daughter, was popular. The problem was that only women knew how to do some of the things that actually worked, like using peppermint essence to settle an upset stomach. Men, like the husband of Mrs. Knapp, had to make things up when their wives died or got sick. He just gave her a cup of camphor when she got cholera because that's what you do, right? A different tourist said it worked. Many people were also stupid enough to listen to one of the fake doctors who came along the way. Edwin Bryant told the story of a quack who had a boy's leg crushed by a wagon wheel and wrapped it in linen and planks to treat it. 9 days later, the boy called to his mother that he could feel worms crawling in his leg. And yes, those were maggots. The boy died as they hacked off the leg with a butcher knife and a handsaw, and it wasn't a happy ending. The child was dead. His miseries were over, Bryant wrote. Nice work, Doc. Cholera on an epidemic scale. You don't want to get cholera, which is an old disease. It was a big problem for a very bad reason, especially in the lowlands near the Platte River crossing. In the nicest way possible, let's talk about why. WYO history says that the crossing of the river was very risky. In 1847, Mormon ferries were built to make it safer, but more expensive. Once they started moving wagons across, they found that they couldn't keep up because dozens of wagons were already waiting to cross. People who did not wait often drowned in front of everyone else. Let's talk about motivation. By 1850, there was a lot of cholera in the area. There were several reasons for this, and Brian Altonen says that one of them was that the saline alkaline water of the Platte made it easy for cholera to spread through the trash that the residents left behind. Aaron Smith, a historian, says that the later settlers left, the more likely they were to get cholera. This is because they were following in the tracks of people who were basically pooping out cholera as they went. If you left too late, you would have to wait by a river where people and animals had been going to the bathroom for months on end. You would also be drinking that water. Didn't know the choice of whether to take the boat or cross the river was so gross, did you? John Grattan starts a war. WYO history says that the first few times that newcomers and Native Americans met, things were mostly peaceful, but things kept getting worse as more and more people moved west. On August 19, 1854, a spoiled brat started a 22-year war. John Lawrence Grattan was his name. He was a second lieutenant in the Army and lived at Fort Laramie. The local Sioux were starting to ask for more and more in the form of tolls, which makes sense given how many people were walking on their land. A few fights broke out, but the last one was when a sick cow from a wagon train got lost and ended up in a Sioux camp. People in the camp were going hungry because promised food was taking too long to arrive, and they had to share their food with thousands of extra mouths. The cop in charge was very polite about the whole thing, even though they killed and ate the cow. He offered to make things right for everyone, but he sent Grattan to talk things over. Grattan took a lot of howitzers, which is not a good way to start a peaceful discussion when things are already tense. You can guess how that turned out. Those battles were won by the Sioux, and Grattan's body was found full of arrow holes. Conquering Bear, the leader of the town, also died, and things got worse from there. We hope you liked this video. Watch another video here.